power went out in the mission and my computer crashed. So perhaps that was the first indication that we were going to have some technical setbacks today, but I think we've managed to recover from most of them. Obviously, the art you're going to see this evening, I mean, this is impressions of the work. It's like flickers on the cave wall. But you know, this is the kind of activity that humans have been gathering around for as long as we've been humans, basically. And I've been given to understand that much of this art is available for sale. So the artist is entertaining inquiries about his work.
Yeah, he's for sale too.
And you'll get a much better sense of the work itself if you get it directly from Palmer Breedes. And without further ado, I give you Paul.
Since about half of you are close personal friends, it's a testament to you showing up here to watch these blurry images instead of coming over to my place where they're crisp and clean and unsold. Anyway, well, I kind of like the idea about the flickers on the cave wall. Maybe we should just set fire to the computer and huddle around that. But that would be wrong, I suppose. Anyway, I spent quite a fair amount of time preparing these slides, so it seems only right that they should be projected as poorly as possible. I have to thank everybody that just spent the last hour trying to solve this problem. So in any case, we'll try to go somewhere with this. And hope you bear with it. The colors will be washed out and it'll be blurry. But that's just what you expect from high-impact artwork. Here's the first piece, originally done for a poster for a show that was produced by John Shirley, the writer. It was a benefit for a battered women's shelter. And it was for a poetry session. The image itself, the main guy falling off a platform onto the tracks, is simply taken from a warning sign in the Paris Metro that I noticed. It only appears on tiny pieces of glass that you're supposed to say, beware of dog. And that's an old joke, but it sure keeps God, people that are afraid of God out of my house, which is just fine with me. And even a sign originally made for something else, such as this simple corn dog sign from Fisherman's Wharf, can be modified with just a few minutes labor, to the dismay of everyone. Again, with warning signs, it occurred to me that because California requires warning signs in restaurants, bars, almost any store, offices, wherever chemicals that cause these illnesses occur or are used. Paintings are fairly toxic. All the paints in them, all the pigments, everything, not very good. So shouldn't art galleries have warning signs? So just a shortcut, why not make the art into its own warning sign? Because in this painting, it's basically slathered with lead and titanium and cadmium, all terrible, terrible chemicals. So when you go to an art museum or buy art for your home, think about that. Think about all the terrible paintings that are being generated in art schools everywhere, just dosed with deadly chemicals. Again with text, semiotics leads to an obvious thing, a play off the old Magritte thing. This was done a few years back when the hullabaloo, which comes up every now and then, I expect to reoccur, about the flag burning amendment. So I thought about different pieces that would challenge lawmakers. That's the neat thing about art, I've noticed. When somebody tries to nail it down, it's like trying to hammer Jello with a nail. Somebody will always come up with a way around it. Here's another one that plays off of expectations, done during the Gulf War, another proud moment in our history. If you recall, that war was prosecuted by the present-day chimpanzee's father. This was a difficult one to display. It's actually in focus. The intent was to have very nice pastel baby colors because Bush comes on TV, you've noticed him, and the key words are terrorism. And he's got a few other ones, the evil one and all that. And I started to feel like I was being talked down to by a kindergarten teacher. And so this is the end result, trying to neutralize this word, which almost is self-neutralizing through its overexposure. What's so terrifying about terrorism, really? Or evil, for that matter. The actual colors here should be all suitable, Dayglow and Barbie pinks, and the whole thing should have the impact of little girl colors. What would attract a 6-year-old girl to this? And never mind. And of course, what 6-year-old girl isn't attracted to evil? I know all the small children I know are. And why not simply dispense with the picture already as it is? These stick-on letters on a piece of wood created something that's titled "Pretty as a Picture." It's an old route. Many artists have done it, but there you go. These next 4 pieces are a triptych. This one's, of course, called yellow. And this one's called blue. This one's called red. And so on. But why even stick with English? So I started playing around with things that look like lettering. And don't ask what it says, because that's why it's art. I'm not going to tell you. It should be in focus. It shouldn't be blurry. The colors are suitably intense, however. And I did a series as if these were magazine covers. These are rather washed out, and they have extreme bit mapping here. These are actually oil paintings that I've done. So there's a fair series of them, not computer graphics. I've had some interesting responses to some of this work. Of course, most people from around here seem to think that this is some kind of Asian or Korean lettering, which was fine until I had some people from China over at my house who all assumed that this was Arabic. So, foreignness and alienness is just dependent upon where you're standing. Here's another one, and another one. Rather cryptic images.
You can read them.
Pardon? Well, you should be able to read them. It's obvious. I mean, don't expect me to read these for you. Can't you read? Didn't anybody ever teach you how to read? Why, a child could figure this out. Let's see. Hold on. There. Okay. Well, the Garage of Doom.
Cthulhu?
No, just ordinary life. That's, I mean, when, isn't that how it works? Messed up again. Let's see. may recognize this with the lettering cropped off. This ended up as the front cover for the Butthole Surfers album Electric Larryland. Well, and that was that. Another oil painting here. Tiring of trying to do such precision work, I'm switching to blurry, out of focus painting. And as you can see, in cases like this, it pays off. This is a painting I'm planning. It's actually a homage I came up with the day I heard that Big Daddy Roth had died. Fondly thought back to my youth in junior high school, where I made lots of spare change drawing rat fink with magic markers on other kids' shirts. So, and here I am still treading on Roth's creativity, which wasn't even his really. He just hired a bunch of other artists to do that for him, much like anybody. Another work I'm planning is this. End up being a painting, more than likely, but I could animate it because these are three-dimensional 3D models I built, virtually built with a modeling program, which I had a fair amount of skill with, with nowhere to take it. I developed that when I worked on a film called Grass that I'll talk about later. But anyway, this is still in the planning stages. The train's made up, but that's a model of a Norman Bell Geddes car. He was the designer in the 30s, very modernistic industrial designer. Did a lot of work on Shape of Things to Come, among other things. Call that. Another 3D modeling image that was done for a museum show I had on the East Coast are these ray guns. Again, all virtual. The piece was called, this image is called Peace Dividend, because I figured that was about all we were going to get back for all that Pentagon dough. It was a bunch of toys, but really flashy toys that you can fight a Star Wars with. Let's see. A few years back, one of the things, as the hype noted, is that I've worked with Gilbert Shelton, or I had been working with Gilbert Shelton for the last 20 years or so on the Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers, the strip he originated. And at one point, around 10 years ago, High Times hired us on as judges for their marijuana contest in Amsterdam. And so I was able to, one afternoon, I was very happy. I was able to call up my mother and say, I got a job. And she said, what? You know, I said, I'm going to be paid thousands of dollars to smoke marijuana. And her reaction was somewhat disappointed. But anyway, this ended up as the commission cover for High Times for the issue, and well, there you go, poor Van Gogh. That's what you get for eating your paints. You should have smoked them. Shelton moved to Europe about 20 years ago, fed up with the U.S., and he had enough money to do something about it. And one of the places I had to travel to work with him was Barcelona, where he was living in the early 80s. This postcard, which I created over there and then off-printed in this colorful and modern fashion, is an image of the Sagrada Familia, the cathedral there that was designed by Antonio Gaudi. And after I had created this image of the cathedral on fire, which is made out of rock, incidentally, I was informed that during the Spanish Civil War, the anarchists who were under siege in Barcelona used up hundreds, if not thousands of gallons of valuable, irreplaceable gasoline in a futile attempt to burn this church down, which would have been criminal because it's quite a beautiful building. It didn't have to be a church. They could have turned it into an anarchist center. Anyway, the anarchists are gone and the church remains. And Paris was Shelton's final stop. He moved there in the mid-'80s, and I'm pleased to say I got to go there quite a few times. Paris, like New York, has been no stranger to that infamous terrorism. And, but they take it all in stride because of their wonderful cafes. These are copies of postcards that I sent back to people. And, well, you know, when we're not drawing cartoons, we have to do something. Here's where the Arc of Triumph used to be, seemed to be replaced by the miniature-sized Arc of Defeat. Notre Dame Cathedral, of course, always beautiful no matter what time of year it's on fire. And, well, last year I was invited to Italy and enjoyed that. Didn't get a chance to send any postcards, but on strolling around their colorful and interesting cemeteries, I noticed that around the turn of the century, one of their conceits was to have paintings on the tombstones of the interred person. And in this case, some of the more telling ones were children. This child, Emma, probably died about 100 years ago. And this is a sketchbook drawing taken from poor Emma's grave, as the same for Cesar Biondi, again done from a painting from his grave. In Paris, at Père Lachaise Cemetery, where I'd like to spend a lot of time walking around, it's only a few blocks from Shelton's apartment, they have a fair number of interesting tombs in fairly serious states of disrepair. This is an actual tomb that's probably air pollution damage to the child's face, wishing goodbye to mom. Another one, let's see, another one, a fairly famous grave of an actor. Another one, a banker. Gosh, they're so imaginative. Another one of quite gothic, morbid vigor. And that's what I enjoy most, morbidity. It makes me laugh. I'm just a goth with a sense of humor, I suppose. Which is why I can't be accepted with them either. Anyway, another tombstone. Here, some figure, but so eroded that it's almost become an abstract sculpture, which I hopefully portrayed here. And in the Biological Museum, a small skeleton, a drawing of which I did here, an unfortunate Cyclops child. Quite interesting. I don't think the child lived, but you can see the interesting forms of its skeleton as it sat in its case. It was a wonderful museum, their natural history museum, which hadn't been fixed up in decades. It looked like they had just run out of money to change anything in 1930. So you see this rundown building in a Parisian park with a much to bring attention to it, except a little sign, and you go in, and you're instantly overwhelmed by a gigantic warehouse-sized room of thousands of animal skeletons and dinosaur skeletons, just crammed together on top of each other. Almost no documentation, just on display in the old style, not not an educational display, just to show. And it's fairly awesome. Like a lot of things in Paris, though, I suspect they're probably going to redo the museum and ruin this. The cemetery I talked about has, in the ensuing years, been sandblasted, knocked over gravestones, and been straightened up. They basically took all the feel away from it in hopes of preserving it. Well, what are you going to do? They still bury people there. Right next to the Cyclops child in its own jar was a fetal Cyclops cat, which, boy, I'd always wanted one. It's a shame it hadn't come to term. And in fact, this was, out of all the displays while I was sitting drawing it in front of its case, almost every person that came by would be excited about it. They'd be completely blasé about everything else, but when they came up to the Cyclops cat, it was always, oh la la, you know, regard. One of my long-term interests, at least in terms of satire, has been the Kennedy assassination. And this is one of the oldest commercial pieces that I did, almost my first job as an illustrator, if you don't count a lot of amateur work, for a book called The Assassination Police Almanac. And this diagram, which you can barely see, which makes it just as accurate, purports to show all the gunmen that day in Dealey Plaza who took shots at Kennedy. And at a gallery that no longer exists, that was run by a friend of mine, Randy Huson, who's now a teacher over at UC Berkeley in their art department, and just recently had a show down at Paula Anglem. He ran a gallery on Market Street called Jetwave, and Jetwave was where I had some of my first shows. And one show we did was this, the Cover Up, Blow Up, Puzzling Evidence Memorial Edition, which Doug Wellman and I curated. And it was for one day only, which was just as well because as soon as the doors closed, all the artwork disintegrated. But it was a grand success. One of the artists in the show, Eric Garrick, created a miniature Aurora road race set mock-up of Dealey Plaza with a tiny presidential limousine driving around and around in a loop. And in the center of the gallery was a grassy knoll with BB rifles. And the gallery attendants were invited to try their marksmanship on their tiny Kennedy. And if they actually hit him in the head, they won a giant rubber chicken. So we had Jackie showed up, a woman in a pink outfit covered in blood, who enthused that everything was just as she remembered it. We actually had Jack Ruby's authentic can opener, complete with soup stains on display. It was the only thing that actually was connected historically to the Kennedy assassination, and of course it was, being so mundane, it was the only thing that nobody believed had anything to do with it. The high point of the show for me was when Paul Krasner of The Realist told, and this is a fellow who started a rumor that Johnson fucked Kennedy's head wound on the way back to D.C., came up to me and said that our show was in very poor taste. One of the pieces in the show was this drawing of a postcard showing the election scene with Lyndon Baines Johnson with the 3 votes that were cast from the voting booth on the 6th floor of the book depository. Another piece from this show was a child's game where you're supposed to get the 3 balls, 3 silver balls, which you can barely see here, from the top left corner down to the bottom right corner in only 2.3 seconds, the amount of time that Oswald fired his shots. Quite a marksman, that guy. I wonder if he could have solved the game that fast. Uh, velvet paintings are another thing I've done. I don't do them, I haven't done any recently, but this was one of the first, this was the second one I did. The first one was a big-eyed Chairman Mao for the back cover of Anarchy Comics. And of course, this one's called 63 Election. And it goes with this one, which is called Leave We Hardly Knew Ye. Again, velvet paintings, only the classiest type of art for me. But really, everybody knows that Oliver Stone was the one that got killed in the Dealey Plaza, and Kevin Costner was merely wounded. This piece was done for fairness and accuracy in recording, which says something about them, huh? One of the big projects that I was going to do in the 90s was a multi-issue comic self-contained story written with Alex Cox and an actor friend of ours, Dick Rude. Alex Cox, you may remember, is director of Repo Man and Sid and Nancy, among other things. And we're going to do this comic, science fiction comic on the Kennedy assassination called 1963 and a Half. And it says 100 assassins from the future packed into this comic book. A comic they don't want you to read. All the excitement of tomorrow ripped from the headlines of today. And boy, we wrote it. We had a contract for it. And then my friends, the California Sales Tax Board, stepped into my life and delayed all the work. Took all the time that I was going to spend on this. It was a 250-page comic story. At the time, this was planned. The comic industry was going strong. We probably could have sold hundreds of thousands of these books. But the BOE kept me from starting it. It was a swell thing. Now, I'm going to divert a little bit about my tax case because John Law, ironically named John Law, was interested in it. And I have to report that recently, thanks to another brave artist, a woman named Heather Preston, who fought with the BOE, pushing the issue that I fought with them about it a bit further in federal court, actually destroyed the California sales tax on artist royalties completely, freeing every type of artist, not just cartoonists, from this tax on people's ideas. So it was nice. It was total victory. The board had tapped me for a test case because they wanted to get at newspapers and back tax newspapers for all their comics. So they told me that my cartoons weren't really protected constitutional speech because they were with drawings. And it was the California government's contention that the only constitutional speech protected by the First Amendment was writing or verbal speech, and that all an artist is engaged in is business. And therefore they wanted sales tax, not income tax, but sales tax on my income. Because I wasn't engaged in speech, which is non-taxable. And it took about 6 years and $250,000 to beat those guys back. And one of the prices that I paid was, by the time everything cleared up, there was basically no comic industry. Nobody was reading comics. The stores were all closing down. The publishers no longer had money to funnel into projects like this because they couldn't guarantee high sales. It was a little bit like .coms, I guess. Only we actually made things. But what it is similar to is pulp magazines. You don't see too many pulp magazines at one time. Lots of millions of people read them. There were hundreds of titles. I think the same is true for comics. Their time has come and gone. But did a lot of drawings for it, such as this one of Lee Harvey Oswald. And we had a complete cast of characters. Jack Ruby with an alien pal, because this was a science fiction story. We really did have hundreds of assassins from the future, and half a dozen alien races, all going after Kennedy for their own unique reasons. Joseph Stalin figured into the story, and so did J. Edgar Hoover. A lot of the ideas that we came up with have been convergently thought of by other people and have appeared in a lot of other media by now. So being first but unheard doesn't make you a winner. Our protagonist was going to be the redoubtable David Ferry, which if you have any familiarity with the assassination lore, you'll know as one of the more twisted, sick side characters. That's carpet padding that he's glued onto his head and his eyebrows. And he really did that in real life. He was a very strange character, and he ended up dead like many of the players. But not in our story, which also had as one of the alien races, we thought, a cute little teddy bear, a telepathic teddy bear race that could control people with their minds. And just to make it even stupider, we called this race of interstellar conquerors Bimbo. And so I'm kind of discombobulated now that I went into the grocery store and saw this package and thought, well, maybe the comic was suppressed for another reason. Because the aliens seem to be everywhere. You all remember Alien Gonzalez. We sent him back. And it seems that aliens really have overrun the world. This was an image I did for a science fiction novel, Silken Embrace, by John Shirley. Who's in the audience, so there you go. So, being overwhelmed by aliens, I spend my time drawing them and thinking about them a lot, or what passes for aliens. Perhaps these are just merely over-caffeinated doodles. Certainly there's no commercial value to these things while I'm alive. And that's just the way the aliens like it. This is a pencil drawing here. And a pencil drawing run through wonderful Photoshop filtering. How unfortunate that you can't really make it out. I haven't really done any printouts of these, and I haven't had a show in several years in San Francisco. But, you know, here's a drawing of consenting relationship between our alien masters and a curious human. And it does seem like we do fight with insects an awful lot. Another velvet painting. And this velvet painting, I like doing velvet paintings because they're so lurid and cheap. The effect was so wonderful, but they're very hard to take care of, and it is with oil paint on velvet, and they stack up and they get in the way. So recently I discovered that gel pens, those opaque pastel pens that seem to be a big fad among children and young girls in elementary school, especially the ones that are chemically scented with artificial fruit flavors. Really, I discovered I could do drawings that it's almost, the effect is almost like a velvet painting because of the high contrast when you work on black paper.
How archival is oil painting on velvet?
Interesting question. How archival? Well, of course, in regular canvas painting, one works on a ground, gesso of some sort, to place in between the canvas and the paint, because paints can contain volatile chemicals that'll destroy the canvas. Therefore, the gesso is a barrier between the actual paint and the painting and the cloth it's painted on. On velvet, of course, you're painting directly on the cloth. Mexican velvet painters, and their foreign brothers, Moroccan velvet painters, and there are even more foreign brothers, African velvet painters, because there's markets for this cheap stuff everywhere. Work on almost velveteen paper. It's not an issue, and their paintings are so cheap, they're not designed to be archival. When I do a painting, though, I'm painting on real velvet, and I try not to use any solvents while I'm painting, because the solvents, turpentine or any of that, is what's going to destroy the velvet. So I'm generally sticking with alkyds, which are polymers, which shouldn't theoretically destroy the cloth, and using those. However, this is just gel pens on paper. It all says acid-free, but who believes what you read on packaging? Here's another one of one of the dinosaurs from the Wheel Inn down in Los Angeles. These are all somewhat small drawings, maybe 8 inches or 10 inches by 10 inches on black paper. Just doodling, really, to see what I can come up with. But wonderful colors with these pens. This is gorilla skeleton here. These should really be sharper. So again, I'm glad you're bearing with this poor projection. This is actually should be very orange because it's a creamsicle. Or maybe it's an office building that somebody took a bite out of.
Took a water hit.
And some
What medium is it?
more stones. These are gel pens. These are drawings on paper.
On black paper, huh?
On black paper. On high contrast opaque ink pens. And the projection here really doesn't get the contrast that these images should have. Oh well, what are you going to do? Look, this little character just took his own scalpel to himself, and he's proud of it. A little more abstract stuff. Of vain attempts to come up with original ideas which don't really exist. I suppose if I just spent my time doing drawings like this, David Bonetti would review me in the Chronicle. And I could finally get into the Museum of Modern Art. But I only draw images. Oh, I'm just a prole. What are you going to do? You know, who would deny that this is a picture of a clown, for instance? Certainly not that fellow. Well, I do like clowns. I've always found clowns fairly scary types. So I even did a self-portrait. This was a magazine cover. It appeared on in the Comics Journal when they ran a 40-page interview with me where I just went on and on about all the things I hate. Except for digital projection. That didn't exist then, or I would have had something to say about that. Well, politics seems empty. This little postcard of the ghost Lenin confirms that. This acrylic painting of Jonestown. Oops. Let's see. Entitled, Those Who Cannot Remember the Past Are Condemned to Repaint It. Because it wasn't the first picture of Jonestown that I did. I did a velvet painting of the pile of bodies. quite wonderful. And that was a picture that the Museum of Modern Art was interested in, although they came to their senses and never called me back. But Robert Arneson, head of Moscone, probably taught them a lesson about controversial local subject matter. But Jones seems to indicate just how badly religion can go, and it seems as if you can't find much solace in food these days either, as this legend on a Melmac plate that I did shows. So where does that leave us? Politics is no good, religion offers no solace, and the food's poison. Well, I have to say, then it's time for Bob and the Church of the Subgenius. It's hard to read this. It says, the children looked at one another and then at Sister Mary Jean. Shh, she said. Father went on, this is some picture, I must say. He put it upside down and looked at it again. I guess it's beautiful, he said at last. Who is the painter? At that, everyone began to laugh. What is so funny, Father asked. I just want to see the painter of this beautiful picture. And we're going to leave this up because it's time for a break. So, stick around. We'll show you more blurry pictures.
Okay, nice try, but I think in the second half we need a little more snap and power. So if you can get on your feet more and bounce around.
Yeah, what?
We've got a couple of girls that want to bring in. Heavy. And one thing is,
Try to solve this computer voodoo. Oh well, what are you gonna do? It's Bob and the Church of the Subgenius, and I've been involved in that group for quite a while, as many of you cult members out there know. Church of the Subgenius was founded by this pipe-smoking guy in the 50s, a salesman named J.R. Bob Dobbs. And a lot of people have a lot of feelings about him. Is he the second coming of Jesus, complete with pet pig? Or is he the next Adolf Hitler? Or is he both? Of course, this is a cult, and as we all know from experience, cults generally don't serve us well. In fact, worshiping Bob's image can be a little like driving into a brick wall at 120 miles an hour. This was a gouache painting done for a cover of a book Simon Schuster released called Three-Fisted Tales of Bob, in which the church elders, the 13 apostles of Dobbs, of which I'm one, not like these Johnny-come-latelys, all got to write and get paid for a series of stories about each other. So we got to print a whole book of in-jokes about our friends. Naturally, the thing sold miserably, and it is now available as an e-book. Isn't that justice? Of course, as you see, what the driver here is, sure, he's going to smack into Bob at 120 miles an hour, but he's racing away from an atomic bomb blast. So there you go, between a rock and a Bob place. As for me, the church headquarters, since it is a cult, makes all its members hang these posters on our walls to remind us of our true task. And of course, you could treat this as a cute art joke, but really, it is a religion. You know. they're dead and famous, but they're everywhere. We are all around you. But it isn't an art joke, and really the church's theories on art are useful in order to burn through bullshit like Julian Schnabel paintings. And really, when you get down to it, simply repeating the face over and over again, you can build a whole career on that, really. It's almost ideal. Never have to think again, just, you know, oh, maybe we'll move the pipe to the other side. That'll be clever. You think that was bad? The New Yorker printed that. That just goes to show how standards have slipped. Bob himself, though, started out in Texas as a traveling salesman and an itinerant model. You can see here he appeared in cheesy ads from the back of Saturday Evening Post and Look. He was a family guy, relaxed at home with his wife Connie here. Until one day he was fixing his television set and something went terribly wrong and he received a communication from God, or rather a God known as Jehovah One, an insane space deity who has his own plans for Earth. And Bob was informed that he had to broker a deal with the aliens. They didn't say which aliens, men from planet X, but any mathematician knows that X is a stand-in for anything. And Bob was supposed to cut this deal on behalf of the subgeni and their fellow humans in order to keep the X's from destroying Earth on X Day, as depicted here. In what is actually my very first Photoshop graphic that I ever made. I really do find computers wonderful things and took to it like a duck to water. And you can see how wonderful they are by this exquisite projection that we have.
Was that in color or black and white when you did it?
But unfortunately, before Bob could cut a deal, Doug Wellman murdered him in 1984 at the Victoria Theater at a show where we had brought Bob out, The Night of Slack. That was so. Bob.
Where's Wellman? Is he?
Wellman's right there with the gun.
No, is he here?
No, Wellman's not here. He's too embarrassed. You know, Wellman. He likes to party on St. Pat's Day.
Yeah. I'll have to kick his ass.
I don't know if you can read here. It says, instant of shooting depicts cowardly act of killing caught by photographer Dennis Hearn. Up to 5 gun persons can be clearly seen in this unforgettable image. The original negatives have been impounded by the FBI, and don't they always? Well, with Bob out of the picture, I'm afraid we're all doomed to a future of money grubbing, as our brains will be encased in these metallic shells and will be set out on condo balconies to contemplate our income levels forever. And I'm ready. And one of the jobs that I've had to slave on for little or no money was a movie that came out a couple of years ago called Grass. Directed by Canadian Ron Mann. Don't know if you remember him from some of his other documentaries. He's Canada's foremost doc maker. Did Comic Book Confidential, another film on the history of the dance Twist. And he's working on a movie about Woody Harrelson right now. But out of nowhere, Ron called me up and offered me the chance to art direct this film he was going to make on the history of marijuana prohibition. And knowing that how much I hate drugs, I was his first choice to work on this project. Originally, it had a very low budget, and the plans for my art direction were very simple, and we're going to be involving basically dealing with flat pieces of artwork and moving a camera across them. Very simple and cheap and traditional filmmaking. And that was before computers. And when I accidentally pointed out that I had a little experience with a 3D modeling program, that was all it took, and all of a sudden I became the chief animator on the film. And so I ended up working on it for 3 years with a handful of people helping me, basically out of charity. My wonderful girlfriend Mimi Heft among them. I was the one-man band almost. Dana Smith in the audience here also was one of the assistants. But I ended up working on this movie for 3 years at about an $8,000 a year income, and it was 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. And isn't it amazing that one person at a computer can make a movie? It'll take them forever, but one person couldn't have done that before. So it was an interesting experiment. The poster went through several different versions. This was an earlier one, and we thought, well, maybe that's the wrong image to project. A little too scary. And then this satanic one didn't seem much better. So we finally settled on this image, innocent young person being seduced by the world's largest marijuana cigarette. Actually, that's not true. I remember, I was back in the 60s, and I remember we used to roll joints the size of muni buses. Really. It was kind of amazing. And they only cost $3, too. Well, the pot wasn't as strong, but we smoked a lot more of it. So, and one of the things that I had to do was produce animated sequences to depict, in one case, various official lines about marijuana use that were trotted out by the government at different times. Such as this one from the 30s, if you smoke it, you will go insane. And it had, those rings would go outward, and it had suitable Looney Tunes music and whatever. You'll just have to go see the movie, or in fact, wait for the DVD. There was a problem with the movie. The director sold it to a distributor, Unipix, who promptly kept all the money. They basically stole $500,000 from us, and we aren't getting it back. They were such thieves that they immediately began taking money right from day one. And in fact, were such thieves that when we went to court with them, they didn't even defend themselves. They just took the money and gave up the rights without a fight, because they knew it would be more expensive for us to go after the money. And they were such cheapskates, they weren't going to defend their thievery. So the rights have finally been relinquished around man, so in about 3,000 years, I might see a royalty check for 85 cents. The other cards, the other animations, going to sell out? Well, hell, I mean, I was the perfect person to ask, you know, pothead. You know, sure, I'll work forever for no money. You know, what fun. And it was fun, if you like slave labor. You know, what can I say? As soon as the movie came out, marijuana was legalized. This particular animation with dozens of darts hitting a target of a marijuana leaf was to commemorate the Boggs Act of 1951, which equated marijuana with bumped it up to the status of a dangerous narcotic. You may remember or may not recall that Harold Boggs, the politician that this was named over, was also a member of the Warren Commission and helped cover up the Kennedy assassination, and then had second thoughts about it and decided that maybe there was something a bit shady, but before he could say much about it, his plane crashed in Alaska and he was killed. Another card commemorating the Marijuana Tax Stamp Act was this one, where I designed an animated iron bars closing around our friendly little plant. And another set of marching police moving towards the screen, said police designed by Mimi Heft. Another animation built of a stoplight to show that the decriminalization efforts that began in the 70s in various locales. Of course, with the current politics, we know what's up with that if we even look at a newspaper around here. Among some of the uses for my 3D work in a program called Infinity, which I was given for free. This was the reason why the decision in production was made to do this extensive 3D animation work. So I built all these models and put hours and hours into it, and then discovered that the program I was using was designed to only output to a much lower resolution video, television, and not for film. And so the program in my computer began to give me problems because we were trying to make it do this gigantic amount of work. And the tech guy, when I explained what my situation was, began laughing at me and said, "Good luck," and told me I was insane. So with that amount of help, I mean, I already knew I was insane. So we couldn't back down from all that work. We couldn't afford a better program that was designed to do it. So we just tortured the computers until they output the work we needed. And these handcuffs were used to show the Oregon decriminalization bill. Another one was a Sgt. Pepper-esque animation for the Nixon war on marijuana. Boy, you know, are we really going to worry about terrorism? We can't even, like, shut down a little plant. Uh-oh. Well, here's another one, a Monopoly board here. It goes by kind of quick in the movie, but you can see it commemorates certain things. If only Monopoly games were like this. It's a little metallic bong making its way around the board. And you don't quite see a lot of the detail in the movie that I put into these backgrounds and things, as usual. Here's one of the chance cards, for instance. And another one of the cards, unlike a Space Invader game, with the star there, and yet another little animated snippet of a 1950s style cartoon of a beatnik being arrested. And of course, my favorite thing of all to do is to complain about the police and draw pictures of flying saucers. So, you know, this job was made for me. I got to animate police flying saucers. And I'm just waiting for the big gig from the police organizations to help design their new tech work. Some of the things, though, didn't make it into the movie, and one of the things that our director on film does is they're responsible for every single image, animated or not. And one of the conceits the director had was to use an underground newspaper from the 60s to display the information about the FDA saying that pot is relatively harmless. Couldn't find an underground newspaper that said that, though. So I made one up. And you can't really tell here, but if I were to print this out, it would look like an old, faded underground newspaper that would have been sitting in a garage folded over for like 35 years. It was a tremendous amount of work. It took me a week. And I sent it up there and then got another edit back because the production took place in Toronto and I stayed here in San Francisco and picture wasn't in it. Went onto the cutting room floor, just decided, oh, we found some guy in a suit to say the same thing, so we don't need your picture. And, you know, that's how it is with a film. You're telling a story, and that's the important thing. And a lot of swell things get designed and made up, but they don't always help the story. One of the projects I also worked on, since I do some digital work, as much as I complain about it, or perhaps because, was a strip at Salon magazine, salon.com, a conceit by a writer named Bob Callahan. He's had some work with Spain Rodriguez and Hal Robbins, as you might or might not know. And so Bob and I came up with this strip at the Dark Hotel called The Night Sky, of which there's several panels here. A story about William Burroughs and some of his history. One of the incidents in his life is marksmanship partner of the unfortunate Joan Burroughs. If any of you don't know the story, at a party in Mexico City in the 50s, they played William Tell and Bill's marksmanship was off. And so he was lucky to escape prosecution for murder. The fact that wealthy relatives helped him get away from Mexico. But he went on to write The Soft Machine after being influenced in Mexico by one of his professors, Robert Barlow. And Barlow killed himself with Nembutols, or yellow jackets as they were known, sleeping pills in the 50s, and had some ties to H.P. Lovecraft and the old ones. So this is mentioned in our strip, which concerns itself mainly with a little piece of writing that Burroughs did in his novel The Soft Machine called The Mayan Caper, about a time traveler who uses drugs to travel back to Mayan Mexico, where he sneaks into the priest's temple and destroys their calendars and brings down the Mayan civilization by introducing anarchy into their ordered system. Of course, with Burroughs writing, these insect-like beasts were hallucinatorily representing the Mayan police state officials. Another thing that I created with Bob was embedded in another story that he actually was mainly doing with Spain Rodriguez and Hal Robbins. But we came up with this little-known newspaper comic strip character from the 30s, Boris Karloff, Soviet superhero. And this just appeared for a week or two, just like maybe 6 panels. But the next thing I knew, HBO was interested in producing this as an animated series, which neither of us could figure out what they were thinking. But we were willing to listen. Unfortunately, this was about the time when the whole dot economy blew up big time, and HBO backpedaled away from online property. So that was that. But along the way, I've done other things. Subversion is where you find it. In this case, I managed to insert it into some stickers done for a series of cards, bubblegum cards for the Topps company that were called Dinosaurs Attack, and back in the 80s. And of course, here's a dinosaur attacking police. But just to be fair, there's a dinosaur attacking a mohawked, spike-headed punk. So, and it smashed the poor guy's boom box to boot. You know, I mean, these were were big sellers to like grade school boys. So, I mean, this is the kind of thing that I loved. Another illustration commissioned by Jake Kinney, another fellow creator and artist who I've done a lot of work with. Did my first comic book with him called Cover Up Low Down, and we're currently both working on illustrations for a science fiction website called infinitematrix.net, which has its URL on that little address where you can see some of our illustrational work for science fiction stories. They're online. But this was an illustration in the Whole Earth Review for a story that was a premise that the Matrix really is an analogy for capitalist society. Surprise! Why, if you eat that red pill, you'll suddenly realize that you're being oppressed by the most normal of conditions. And once you wake up to this, of course, you can't fall back asleep. Everybody knows that. You can see the aliens with special glasses. If you eat the pills, you can see them. They're everywhere. Another commercial job was this illustration of a character from a horror novel by a friend, Nancy Collins. This character, sad to say, is known as Burning Man. Ha 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 ha.
Larry Harvey's gonna get you.
Well, didn't he do Harvey Comics? This image was from even further back in my computational art career, and it was for a little animated comic that was included on a CD-ROM by the Residents called Bad Day on the Midway. And it's a story of the tattooed woman at their carnival and how she came to be covered with tattoos of dogs. It's kind of interesting. Of course, the poor residents put this out right when the CD-ROM market crashed, so so much for that. These were morphs of some of the tattooed woman's former dates. I got to turn some of my friends and relatives into animals. This is Alex Cox, the film director, and this is my cousin Chris. Well, that's the fun of being an artist, huh? One of the last images in the strip is, of course, her at the carnival showing off her tattoos to the appreciative audience of my desktop tchotchkes. Another commission piece by science fiction writer Bruce Sterling for a site since extinct, not unlike this image, called the Dead Media Project, and it was supposed to be a site keeping track of all the other communications media that had since gone obsolete. Of course, now the site's obsolete. What are you going to do? This is a image from an album cover called Live from Madrid. It was album was by some members of the ex-Flaming Groovies. A album cover by a band, punkish band called US Bombs, a play on the Sex Pistols, Never Mind the Bollocks cover. Cover for the Deviants. I really like this cover because it only took me, thanks to the computer, 10 minutes to create. And boy, you can't do that with your hand and a pencil. Another album cover for a label in LA called Bombed Records. A friend runs it. And yet another one, again showing some 3D imaging modeling work. Another cover by John Shirley, but this cover won't be seen on his book because the art director / editor changed his mind at the last second and changed the cover around, because being a writer, this art director thought he knew more about art than I did. Made me quite angry. But I got even with Shirley, knowing he was arachnophobic. I designed this. And then he got even with me by rejecting it. So there it goes. But he's in the audience and now he has to look at it. And now all of you know that you can scare him by showing him spiders. Here's a couple of labels designed, hopefully, for use as beer labels for a small edition brewery in Paris. So here we have Martian beer and a label for Meta beer. So, I mean, who could resist drinking a beer with this on the label? Except that they have so many strange beers over there, you know, if you went into a beer shop and saw a brand like this and opened it up, it might be flavored like bananas. So you have to be careful. This was a, let's see, probably about a 12-foot by 8-foot painting, full color acrylic, commissioned by a now shut down museum called the Words and Pictures Museum that was founded by Kevin Eastman of Mutant Ninja Turtles fame. And the museum was in Northampton, Massachusetts, dedicated to preserving the dignity of comics as actual art. Naturally, the museum shut down after a few years and Eastman began selling his collection off at bargain basement prices, no longer interested in the fading art form. So I guess this painting is now in his own personal possession, which it should be. It's quite a nice painting. And one of the things that I have been doing just to amuse myself over time is taking all the little plastic bits and junk that I acquire and editing their context a little bit with an X-Acto knife and some putty. Added this machine gun to of course, Mr. Peanut salt and pepper shaker set. And took this Santa snow globe and took out the Merry North Pole scene and put something more practical in. I mean, you know, gee, Santa could use a set of intestines, I thought. And when you shake it up, you can see, you know, the anti-acid floating around. And it doesn't take much to alter, you know, sometimes just a little change in the face is enough. I mean, these things are all where you find it. Sometimes you don't even have to glue anything. This nativity scene created simply by placing a plastic insect on top of the baby Jesus. Very touching. A self-portrait here. You probably can't see it very well, but revealing my bleeding heart nature. Created after an unfortunate romantic ending, just as well as it usually turns out. Let's see, so switching heads around, you come up with some fairly interesting things. These are small. I mean, that creature on the left is maybe only an inch tall, or an inch and a half tall. I lived in the Mission a while, and one of the things I've noticed are the little magnetic dashboard icons. And I've been acquiring those and altering them to suit my own visions for a while. Created a bunch of them.
It's not like a Christmas tree?
No, they're scent-free, so sensitive people can admire and collect them. Another one. And of course they're magnetic, so they will stick to a refrigerator or dashboard of an older model car that's not made out of plastic. Or you can degauss your computer hard drive with them. A handy, one combines the dashboard religious icon with a compass. these things, and maybe they weren't dashboard icons because after all, cars are made out of plastic and nobody can stick these things on their dashboard anymore. And in fact, they're getting harder and harder to find. But I kept making them anyway. And it occurred to me that perhaps maybe what I was actually on my way to creating was a chess set. Perhaps maybe some knights. Here a figure with a globe for a head. Another one with an 8-ball, and holding a spike, of course, that's rammed through its own breast. Yet another fighter. It's amusing. It keeps me out of trouble. I don't get into fights. I just stay home and play with my toys. Just like when I was a child. Everybody goes, "Aren't you clever?" And then they go on with their adult lives, leaving me alone. And it can't get away from the aliens. As pawns. How about that? What a switch. And workers as well. They make good pawns too, as these hand-headed figures show. We move into some of the higher members of the chess army, the queens, and attendants. Now, I still haven't come up with any kings, but that's the difficult part of this, just waiting for the right piece of plastic to serendipitously meld, such as, listen, olive oil-headed figure carrying a divining rod. She's blind, of course, so that comes in handy. And another flanking figurine. And of course, the ultimate statement here, as always. Telling little way to end this talk. But I'll be happy to do questions and answers if you like. And if you don't like, thanks for coming. I want to thank the Spanganga people and the Tenticle people for all the work they put into this. And again, my special friend Mimi for putting up with my crazed personality. And the poor tech people who tried. So, does anybody have any questions? Does anybody have any answers?
Let's get into the New York Times.
Pardon?
This should be in the New York Times.
Yeah, every day on the front page. I agree.
So on the velvet painting, why?
Why the velvet painting?
Yeah, when did you start doing it and why?
Like I said, I did the first velvet painting. It was actually a suggestion by Jay Kennedy in 1978, who was editing Anarchy Comics, and we thought it would be a telling, comment on proletarian art, mixing far left Maoism with velvet paintings. The next one was for the Kennedy show a year later, and that seemed to be like, why not do that for, to show its impact in the popular culture. The conceit of that Kennedy show basically was an anniversary. It was conceptually supposed to be a commemoration of a performance art piece by a group of artists called The Conspiracy, where they assassinated the President of the United States. And the show was to commemorate their artwork. So that was the wrap for that show. So the velvet painting fit into there nice. But then I just thought, why not do a whole show? And so I created, in addition to those two, I did paintings of Jonestown and a few other unsettling things, and some unsettling things that don't seem quite so horrible, such as bar guns and microwave ovens and household appliances, which take on their own disturbing natures when placed in between pictures of death and destruction. I had another show, created a few more velvet paintings of the AIDS virus and the Challenger explosion, and subject matters, lung cancer, I think was one of them.
You show those?
Yeah.
Tonight?
No. Oh, well, no, I didn't show those tonight. They've been seen before. I thought I'd try to show some, mostly things that hadn't been seen. The thing I got into the velvet painting was trying to come up with images that were recognizable, but really disturbing, but attractive, because the nature of the velvet painting makes them look so neat and colorful and lush and glowing, so that you like looking at it. But this thing that you like looking at because it's so pretty colored is a painting of a murder, which makes you think about what the image is, which is my intent. You know, it's basically to get you to think about these things by using this trick called art.
Who's your favorite artist?
Who's my favorite artist?
Besides yourself.
Besides myself? Well, that's a tough one. I don't know. It's hard to say. I think Duchamp killed art, made it obsolete, so everybody else, me included, ever since then is just wasting our time. Aside from that, I guess Jeff Koons, because he's everything I hate about art. And he even does stuff like me, you know, so there you go.
How did Peter Jennings like your velvet art?
Oh, there's a prompt from the audience. Years ago, I actually was on Nightline. They did a 7-minute piece on me. Not that it helped my career at all, but there's an interesting story behind that. A friend of mine, when I lived in Arizona, I met a writer, and then I moved to the Bay Area, and I did these velvet paintings, and he stayed in Arizona and wrote a story on Arizona culture for a business magazine in Arizona, and it was about velvet painting, and he mentioned me in it, because I had lived in Tucson before I ever did these paintings. That got picked up on the wire services and printed a lot of papers. And World News Tonight was going to do a piece with Charles Corral, or somebody of that bloated ilk, doing an attack piece on modern art. And they thought, velvet paintings in galleries, that's a good place to go. Because one of their readers saw this little mention of my name in a clip, in a reprinted story. So the next thing I know, World News Tonight shows up with a crew. And they spend a day filming me in these velvet paintings. And the show, and it was scheduled to be on the evening news with the World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. And they told me, oh, it's going to be on. And then I called all my friends, $50 on long distance phone calls. And then it wasn't on. And then they did that to me 4 times. And then kept saying, well, it just gets bumped. There's other news. And nothing happened for a couple of years. I just considered it a dead end. And the next thing I knew, Nightline, a crew from Nightline called me up, and they wanted to, actually it wasn't even a crew from Nightline, it was the director of the original piece came up and said, we want to expand it, I'm going to work on one of these magazine shows on television, we're going to do personalities, little profiles on people in between the stories about housewives killing their husbands' girlfriends. And you're going to be one of them. So they came up and they shot me, followed me around for a week. You know, spent $100,000 doing this. And then that didn't play. They decided, no, we're going to stick with the murder stories. So my poor little piece didn't have a home. And then it was revealed to me that the reason the whole piece on art hadn't run on World News Tonight was because Peter Jennings was and Rune Artledge, the head of their news department, were mortally offended by my artwork, being close personal friends of Jackie Onassis, among others. So, and Jennings basically said, that painting will run on my show over my dead body. And then I was told that Ted Koppel heard that and said, we're going to put it on Nightline. And they did. And I found myself enshrined on it on one Thanksgiving night show back in '92, where Cokie Roberts told all the country that I was an American that everybody should be thankful for. And not only me, but I got to share this anointment with other luminaries such as Uncle Milty, the guy that invented the ant farm. Which, you know, puts me back into a realistic perspective. Yeah, the ant farm.
You make something that works.
So, anybody else?
Cokie Roberts is Hale Boggs' daughter.
What's that?
Cokie Roberts is Hale Boggs'
That's right. And Cokie Roberts is Hale Boggs' daughter, as you remember Hale Boggs from the marijuana movie and the Kennedy assassination. Well,
Yeah, what about a Peter Jennings velvet painting?
well, I don't know. There's too much of a good thing, you know. I have to look for other things to work in. You know, when you steal all your ideas, you have to keep looking for fresh grass, as it were.
So why does museum art suck?
Why does museum art suck?
Yeah.
Well, why do you think? Not all of it sucks, but it's the process. I mean, the whole art scene sucks, really. When you introduce money into it, that always rots everything out. Why do the critics keep going on and on about abstract expressionism? Well, because those same critics and their pals all own this stuff, and value has been pushed up. And if they don't keep saying how great it is, it may be considered not as significant as they thought originally. And the value of their investments and their status that goes along as owning this property would fall. Art museums prefer dead artists, and so do collectors and dealers, because once the value of the works are pumped up, a dead artist can't pop into view and pull their pants down in public and suddenly embarrass you and render the value of their work less. You know, there's other equal arguments on why it's a good thing to collect these things, but you know, all these institutions have their own dangers of calcification and of course money and acquisition. So what are you going to do? I want to be in a museum, and yet I want to burn them down. Go figure.
You want to pay me to burn it down?
Yeah, maybe I should burn the museums down while I'm in them. Then everybody will be happy.
What's your day job?
This is my day job, which is why I live in dire poverty. But somehow punching a clock, if I go back to that, that just seems to be defeat. There's something to that old fact. If you do it for, you know, the time you trade for money, you never get it back. And that's what that chunk of your life was worth. You know, but there's nothing wrong with trading your time for money. You know, people have to do it.
You know, you mentioned comics a couple of times, like alluded to them as a medium in decline, which I don't really disagree with. But I was wondering if you might comment briefly on, aside from the myriad of economic.
Created by Nickelodeon. You will not be allowed to have a name for yourself because that will allow you to become an independent player. Walt Disney does not want another Walt Disney setting up shop with the next Mickey Mouse unless they own it.
What about the internet as a means of distributing or
exposing.
It's great. It'll expose everything to anybody that has a computer that happens to stumble on your work. You won't make any money off it, though. It's a great, you know, the internet, it's a great gossip place. It's a good place for doing certain types of transactions. And it's a whole universe full of animated brochures, advertising stuff. That's basically what it is. The technology isn't developed enough so that, you know, anybody can stand to look at a screen for a really long time without getting eye strain. I mean, as much as you'd want to, it's physically harsh.
What about showing like a page of your comic strip on the internet, animated, and then having them order the book?
Well, you would think that would do well, and if you're a little business, you might be able to like get by, but there's a lot of unemployed people stumbling around on burned out business models along those lines. The internet will become what it becomes. You know, it's not going to go away, but it's certainly not the ultimate library at the moment, and it's certainly not the information superhighway. It is another communications tool, just like the telephone. It has its own purposes and it has its own uses, and those will evolve and mutate on their own along with the technology. You know, someday we will run out of trees and there won't be any more paper, and coincidentally that'll show up at about the same time the cheap digital reader takes place. You know, but with a comic book, whether it's an old comic book that sold for 10 cents or a current comic book that sells for $6, you know, with half the pages, you still don't need a $1,500 eyeball to look at it. And that's the difference. And it appeals, you can't collect anything off the web except URLs. A lot of human instinct is gravitated towards things. You know, the information, all art, all this is information, but the delivery system or the means of reproducing it has to be good enough to capture all that information, or it adds its own twist to it. I was in the Museum d'Orsay in Paris looking at the paintings of the Chartres, I think it was the Chartres Cathedral by Monet. Staggering paintings. I mean, I've only seen these things in books, you know, tiny little reproductions printed in printing inks that don't, you know, have the impact of these physical objects that were just staggering. You know, I was amazed to be in front of these things. It was like punching a hole right through your skull. And yet all around me were tourists moving through the room, video